Thank you for joining us. This is our January 9th meeting of the British Empire Study Group. I want to wish you all the best for this new year. We're starting off with a bang here with Adrian. I'm going to turn it over to my co-host, Rob Lutz, to introduce our speaker for this evening.
Thanks, Joan. Welcome, everyone, to the British Empire Study Group's first webinar of 2025, The Crimean War Through Postal History, British Allies, and More. The Crimean War began in October 1853 in the Crimean Peninsula and ended in February 1856. It was a war fought mainly on the European Crimean Peninsula between the Russians and the British, French, and Ottoman Turkish forces. This was not an American war and typically gains but a footnote in American history books. The Crimean War is often ignored even by European postal historians. Russia was in dispute with the Ottoman Sultan over Russia's demands of protection for its Orthodox subjects. Russia was also in conflict with France and England over Catholicism and the holy places in Palestine, all the makings of a recipe for a war. Our speaker this evening, Adrian Pearson, will examine this conflict using his postal history collection in his second presentation of the two-part series, beginning with a brief summary of the war and his outline for this evening. A few words about our presenter. After studying ancient history and business studies at university, Adrien got a job as a numismatist specializing in Roman coins. He's currently a technical learning designer simulating computer systems. He loves that job and doesn't want to retire anytime soon. Adrien began collecting stamps and first-day covers in the 1970s, though he quickly became interested in postal history. He didn't specialize at that time, but just collected anything that he liked. About 20 years ago at a stamp fair, Adrien discussed specializing his collecting interests with Bill Barrow, who suggested the Crimean War as a subject in which Bill also had an interest, as well as some material for sale. Adrien liked the idea as he already had some knowledge of the Crimean War and its relatively short conflict and the use of the many new technologies. Since then, Adrien's been collecting Crimean War postal history, letters and documents, and continues to research the subject in even more depth. Other philatelic interests include early letters prior to 1750 and 19th century illustrated postcards. He's now using his collections to educate and entertain philatelic clubs and societies. So without further ado, I give you our presenter this evening, Adrian Pearson.
Thanks very much, Rob. I'm just going to share my screen now. So we'll crack on. Greetings from a rather cold Preston, UK. And Postal History of the Crimean War Part 2. But we'll have a recap and we'll work through very quickly. As Rob's already said, Ottoman Empire, France, United Kingdom, and later on Sardinia, which was a separate country then, versus Russia. This is a map of Europe in the mid 1850s. Basically, the Russian Empire tried to occupy what is now part of Romania, and the Turks eventually declared war and kicked them out, and the Austrians moved in to stop them coming back in. Britain and France sent a force out there to help the Turks and work on their own strategic interests. That's why you've got a little ship in the Black Sea. But the Russians had retreated, so they then had to decide what to do with this fleet and soldiers, because a lot of them were dying of cholera. So they decided, because a Turkish fleet had been sunk by the Russians from the naval base of Sebastopol, the Allies decided to neutralize it and sailed from the mainland in what is now Bulgaria, but was part of Turkey then, sailed to the Crimea. And here's something I showed last time, but I found it interesting. One of the ships that sailed to the Crimea with the army was the steamer Trent, which is a big place in American history, because I think it was the USS San Jacinto stopped the Trents and tried to remove two Confederate envoys to Britain and France, and it caused a diplomatic incident. Well, this one, Lord Raglan, who was the commander-in-chief, is asking him, saying that he'll pay more to clear have soldiers clear the Trent steamer out. So the Trent wasn't famous then, but it became famous later, and that's a picture of Lord Raglan, and he was the British commander-in-chief in the Crimea, at least until he died of either dysentery or cholera. So the Allies landed at a place called Calamita Bay, which wasn't very very good, but they got ashore okay. They had a battle at the River Alma as they headed south towards Sevastopol. The Russians were defeated, and it's surmised that if the Allies had walked into Sevastopol straight away, they could have captured it. But they didn't. They decided to besiege it from the south. So the main Russian army pulled out into the center of the peninsula, leaving naval reserve, some Marines, sailors, and a relatively small military force in Sevastopol initially, but that was augmented later on because the siege wasn't complete. So the war then went on to the British, French, and later Sardinians besieging from the south, the Russians getting putting bastions up, and the British, French, and Sardinians digging trenches to go towards the bastions. Meanwhile, the Russian strategy was to get them out, and the series of battles, Inkerman and Balaclava, Inkerman, and later the Ternaya, were to try and oust the Allies out of the Crimea, but it didn't work. The French had their main base at a place called Kamiesh, which was a better harbour than the British had, which was at Balaclava, and was very narrow and difficult to get ships in and out, and that caused great problems. So, what effects did the Crimean War have on the United States? Well, perhaps more than you'd think. There was a serious diplomatic incident caused by British consuls illegally recruited in the United States. I think the British government initially denied all knowledge until it was proved that they were, because of the cholera and effects of battle and other diseases, Britain was chronically short of troops. There were changes to shipping on major routes due to need for additional tonnage to transport British and French troops. Among the ships that were withdrawn was most of the Cunard line and the Collins line in particular, which you'll see from a bit of evidence later on, took advantage of that to put more shipping on, and other American merchant ships. So again, that's just again shortage of ships. Crimean War, it's affected the Russian economy. It basically bankrupted Russia. I mean, we're hoping the current war is going to bankrupt Russia, but it doesn't seem to be. But it caused the Russians to sell Alaska to the United States in 1867. I can't remember how many $1 million it was, but quite a few $1 million. And the Crimean War influenced military strategy and tactics in the Civil War. So for trench systems round Sevastopol, think trench systems round Petersburg and Richmond. So that's all right. That's and also obviously the United States had observers in the Crimea. I can't name them, but I do know that they did have some, as well as, just like the Europeans had observers in the American Civil War. Technological advances in the Crimea, again, which fed into the American Civil War. Steamships, including armoured vessels and steam locomotives. Electric telegraph. Extensive use of mass-produced rifles. In the Crimea, it was the mini rifle. In the American Civil War, sorry, we call it American Civil War. In the Civil War, it was the Springfield rifle. Trench warfare, well, I've already said about that. Prefabricated hospitals, anaesthetics, and organised nursing. So I don't know whether you've heard of Isambard Kingdom Brunel, but he designed a prefabricated, mass-produced hospital. It arrived out in Turkey that they couldn't make full use of it, but it did lead on to military hospitals. Anesthetics, they had chloroform mainly, which was tended to be better than ether, but that was only for very, very few people, and it arrived quite late. Most operations were performed without anaesthetic. Organised nursing, well, everybody's heard of Florence Nightingale, but it wasn't just Florence Nightingale, it was other people as well. But she eventually became superintendent of nurses out in the East. Photography in the war zone, both British and French and even Italian. Main person there was Roger Fenton, and he took a great many photographs in 1854, 1855. Other, I think it was James Robertson was another one, and people concentrate on the British photographers, but I've just been inquiring into some French photographers, but they're not as widely known as the British ones. War correspondence, William Howard Russell, that comes to mind, but there were the others as well. And an organised mail system for the forces, which was really the first time this was extensively used. So where were the post offices? Obviously Balaclava, initially at Varna, though I think a small post office did remain there. There were certainly still some troops there, both British and French, even when the main armies went to the Crimea. The main hospital, the main post offices in Constantinople were the British and French ones at Pera. And then when the wounded started arriving at Scutari, another post office opened there. The Gallipoli post office was initially used before as the troops were arriving, but I think a French post office continued continued there, though the British never had an official one at Gallipoli. So the main postal routes. So I hope you don't mind I'm going fast, but it's just that this has been already shown. So the main postal routes were between the Crimea and Constantinople. That was by both British and French ships. And because of an agreement with the French from June 1854, the mail was transferred to French packet ships, which went on the route via Messina to Marseille, then by rail across France to Calais, then to Dover, then to London. There was a much less used rate for 1 penny, which soldiers and seamen could use using British naval ships via Malta to Southampton. That wasn't very often used, but it was available. But the problem is that it wasn't scheduled. You just had to wait till a ship was going in the right direction. Right, the concession rates to and from the war, which applied roughly speaking from June, July 1854. Initially from March, April, May 1854, the full price rates had applied. But we'll just concentrate on the concession rates for the moment. So Crimea and Black Sea Fleet, officers and soldiers, sailors, up to a quarter an ounce was threepence via France, and soldiers and seamen a penny via Queen's ship or transport, as I've explained. In the Baltic, which was another major theatre of war, and I'll deal with it later, you had the officers at varying rates, which eventually went down to threepence via Danzig in northern Prussia, and soldiers and seamen again slightly less, and again went to threepence via Danzig. And then you've got the other rates, Queen's ships transport, and for officers and seamen a penny. So again, we're still recapping what was on the envelopes. Well, Crimean mail, all mail sent from Britain to the Crimea or to Turkey had to have adhesives on it. You rarely find them without at the late stage throughout the war. But mail coming from Turkey and the Crimea could be sent unpaid without penalty. So they had a threepence for value of threepence, which was the concession rate up to 1/4 ounce. For a short period, there was a stamp, but usually it was written on it, on the envelope, and so that was the going rate. But you sometimes had 6-penny rates for heavier letters, again with just a 6 scribbled on it, and that was paid on delivery. And normally there would be a penalty for an unpaid mail, but the concession was that Crimean mail wouldn't have a penalty and they just paid the threepence. Again, this is stamp mail, what you normally see. Now, going out to the Crimea, again, there's one to Lieutenant Colonel Cox here, which is major correspondence, that everything had to have adhesives on it. From the Crimea, as I said, you can get stamped and unstamped. These are the vast majority of mail from the Crimea with adhesives on the adhesives are obliterated in London, and they're put in sealed bags, which were transferred at Constantinople, and again via France, and then they were opened in London, and the adhesives were cancelled in London. I've actually got a letter with, it's possibly unique, a British Army bag seal from the Crimea, and that's the British Army bag seal. So you get various rates, but this is just what you normally see. So I'm just going to, what's usual. So as the mail from the Crimea got more and more, they started with the post office in London cancelling it, obliterating it. Started with the ordinary diamonds obliterators with numbers in them. They then started to use to do 2 of the stamps at once, and by the end of the war, they got, from the middle of the war, they've got 48 and 49 were triple cancellers, so they could just stamp once on the 3 stamps in a line, which that's how they usually place, but not always, as you've seen. Unusually, the cover I'm illustrating here was one actually going out to the Crimea, which it may be unique with the triple canceller on it, but when they saw there were 14 stamps on it, penny stamps stuck on it, they used the triple canceller, 48 in this case. So the only obliterators that we use out in the Crimea, and these command quite a considerable premium, is the crown and ciphers. And as I've said, that as you can see from that cover, it's often poorly stamped, and I don't know what it was made of, whether it was wood or whether it was a metal one, but it never really, to get a good one, it's not easy. The other one, which I've actually got the proof book for, well, I haven't got it, but I've seen the picture of the proof book for it. March 1855 is the Star Between Ciphers, otherwise known as OXO, after the gravy browning, and that was I think that was applied at Constantinople personally, partly because all Scutari mail only has that. All Scutari mail with adhesives only has that, so that's usually better struck than the crown and stars. So on the reverse of the envelopes, they were cancelled out in the Crimea, the postmark. So the type 1 was all occasions, that was the standard one. There are different measurements on these, and some have lines in between the words and some have dots, and they do occur in different colours. Then in March 1855, you got the A and reverse C. The Constantinople's often in red or black, and that's got the code A. Balaclava's code B. It got from December 1854 to 1856, and for some reason Scutari is reverse C. Now, why it's reverse C, nobody actually knows, but it is distinctive. So it's possible that there were other codes with C on it. It could have been done to show so it stood out. But whatever it was, even if it was a mistake, they didn't bother changing it, and it remained reverse C throughout the war. So that's a quick recap of where we got to last time. So we now other types of mail. Again, we're sticking with Britain at the moment. Now, breaches of post office regulations. The one on the left is my favourite. It's my friend Mrs. Knowles. And what Mrs. Knowles did is that her husband was captain of a transport lady, Franklin. And they used her as to send mail to her sister in Liverpool at the soldiers and seamen's concession rate of a penny. And so he signed it as her commanding officer, because that's one of the reasons. And she stuck the penny stamp on it as if she was a seaman and posted it, presumably via British ship. And some got through, so they only paid a penny instead of the 11pence that they should, instead of the shilling that they should, 12 pence that they should have done, and some didn't. And this got caught by the post office and surcharged 11 pence, which they were lucky because they did, because it didn't exact a penalty. It would have been a shilling or 12 pence normally. So it just got caught. Some of them have got through. I don't think I have one, but I've got to try and find. I might have got one, but I just like how it's being caught, that and the blatantly, how blatant it is. The one on the right hand side is insufficiently stamped. I'm not totally clear why this is insufficiently stamped, but I'm suspecting that it's because it's sent to Honourable George Eliot, who was actually, I think, in the military, care of Odo Russell, British Embassy, Constantinople. Odo Russell, incidentally, was the son of the Prime Minister, not at the time, but Lord John Russell, who was Prime Minister before and after the Crimean War, and Odo Russell was one of his sons. And I think that the Post Office has seen that is the British Embassy, and treated it as civilian mail. Although I'm not sure, because it seemed to have a 10 there, and I would have thought it would have been 9, so as the rate would have been a shilling. But so I'm not absolutely certain, but that is what I suspect, that they treated that as with Mrs. Knowles in one direction, they treated this as civilian mail in the other direction. Right, this is what I call OHMS, on Her Majesty's Service, which would normally be free to used by government departments. I've not found one yet where postage wasn't paid, even though it said on Her Majesty's Service. So the one on the left is from Scutari, so you've got the reverse C on it, and it's got a very poor OXO cancellation, but it's marked OHMS. I think that this is written by Florence Nightingale from Scutari. I do have a letter from her, and the writing is very, very similar, and I may even have the letter. I found a copy of the letter on an archive that went in it. I can't say definite. I've had one person say no, who should know, who's a document dealer. He said he doesn't think it is, but on the other hand, somebody who's written a book about Florence Nightingale say that it does look like her writing. So the jury's out. The second one is again threepence So it's written private, and Major Mackay, and that's sent to London. And the middle one is a quite scarce letter. It's sent by Lord George Paget, as he signed it. It's charged, I think, 5 centimes, and it's been sent from Constantinople to Eupatoria in the Crimea. So it's a rare internal usage, and it's got the French receiving bow M. Now, I'll tell you about those a little bit later. But even poor Lord George Paget had to pay the postage, or should I say the recipient did. This is another interesting and quite expensive part of the Crimean War, is registered envelopes. I've so far done a census of these, and I've so far found 15 all sent from the Crimea and Turkey. I haven't found any going out to the Crimea and Turkey, although there is a registered receipt signed by Florence Nightingale that has been kept. So presumably some did go out to Turkey, but I've never seen one. So far I've found 15, of which I've got 5. The first one is from Scutari. The first one on the left is from Scutari. It's got a OXO cancellation with excuse me, 1 and 6pence embossed. So that will be a shilling for the weight and 6pence for the registration fee. On the other one is from the Alan Holyoke collection, and again this is a little bit bizarre because it looks like it was paid in London. It's not clear where that was actually paid, and it's originally gone with threepence, but it's still marked registered with a number. If you notice, both are registered with numbers, but it has been written 2 and threepence paid. I can't see why they would have let it go with just threepence stamps on. So it's possibly that was paid at the Crimea, but it doesn't actually say, there's nobody signed it. It's just that it's paid to bring that up to 2 and 6pence. So again, 2 shilling. It's a quite expensive. It's still only 6pence for the registration fee and 2 shillings for the for the postage.
Adrian, we're at the halfway mark.
Thank you. So people were sending letters home and sometimes sending valuables home and getting them lost. You weren't supposed to send cash in registered envelopes, or certainly not coin. What some people did, they divided notes up and sent them in that way, so they wouldn't get stolen. But there was a lot of pressure to introduce money orders so that they could be paid out to soldiers' families at post offices in England. So the soldier bought the money order. They then sent the money order to a particular person, and it was a more secure. It was, they could pay for things actually in England rather than actually sending coins or cash. It was more secure. This only came in January 1856, and these are the 2 rates. This is from the post office at Constantinople, and which shows the new rates. There is an interesting aside to that, in that there were 4 new cancellations sent out for the money. They were sent out for the money orders, and one of those was inadvertently used for postage. And there are 3 very rare covers with a Constantinople British Army Constantinople cancellation, which shouldn't have been used. Another one that needs a lot more research is newspapers. Like a lot of armies, both officers and soldiers, obviously there were a lot more, all the officers were literate. So literacy in the British Army isn't that clear. Probably about 50%, particularly Scottish regiments. But about the number of letters, you wouldn't think so. But a lot of them they wanted the papers and news from home, And a great many, one of the main complaints to the British postmaster is not where are my letters, it's where are my papers. And so again, parcels and boxes were sent out. You know, if you're an officer, you could get sent a Fortnum and Mason's hamper out there. Well, probably packed in a box, but it was still Fortnum and Mason. And so if you had the money, you could get such things. The rate, just a moment. The rate was tuppence for a paper and then reduced to a penny. Excuse me, my voice is going a bit. Going in the other direction, it's called what's called the red envelopes. I've not seen one from the Crimea, I'm afraid. But in late 1854, because of complaints from journalists that their dispatches were getting delayed, also there were lots of competition to get to the telegraph which was originally to Belgrade, but eventually extended to the Crimea, but for military usage only. So there was a big complaint by the proprietors of the London morning papers that they couldn't get dispatches in time or at the same time. So Rowland Hill and the Postmaster General decided that if it was sent in a red envelope to the editor of the appropriate newspaper with the address, and that had to be to the editor and only the editor, if it arrived in the evening at the port, the post office would do their best to ensure that it arrived in London by midnight so it could hit the presses for the morning papers. So that's how this started. I still have to see one of these from the Crimea. This is a later one, but why would an editor really keep them? Somebody might, but I've not seen one. So we've all concentrated on the Crimea and Turkey. Where else was the war fought? Well, the second main place was, it was out in Greece. That is, as you can see, the British Army sent a small expeditionary force, 3 regiments only. Mail from Greece from the British Army in Greece is very rare. I suspect, though I'm not certain, this has been taken to London and posted there, although it would have had a tuppence on it, so I don't know. But it's a London cancel, so it's not clear where it's been. It's not clear when the 3 was put on, but I presume it's been sent there. It's been sent probably via Trieste, but I haven't got the marks on the back. Oh no, it's Marseille. Sorry. Through Marseille to London. Sorry, I apologise for that. So it's a bit. It's not quite clear. It's from Piet de Vavrin, but as I say, it's sent unpaid, and there aren't many. The other one is a civilian cover from Constantinople to Greece. Don't know who can read Greece, but it says Piraeus at the bottom. Greek P-Y-R-R-E-U-S. So at the bottom of the address. I'm not sure what it's 40 somethings, but I'm not sure exactly what that denomination is, what currency it's in. So the main theatre of war, other than the Black Sea, was the Baltic. And the British and French, it was mainly a naval war, and the British and French sent a combined fleet to the Baltic to blockade the Gulf of Finland. Bear in mind, Finland itself was still part of the Russian Empire. It was autonomous, but it was part of the Russian Empire. And the fleets blockaded during the summer of 1854 and the spring and summer of 1855. In 1854, by November, they were back at Kiel in Germany. I think it was part of Prussian, so it may have been a separate city, but if you see that H, it's near there. That's the H for Hamburg. And mail was sent via Kiel and Hamburg in the winter. in late 1855, the fleets came home because peace negotiations were underway and they didn't go out in 1856. So because they didn't want to be caught by the ice in the Baltic when it iced up in the winter. Much mail was forwarded to the port of Danzig in Prussia. And during the summer, the fleet delivered, the ships delivered the mail to Danzig, and it went by a Prussian mail system through Aachen to Belgium and then to London. So, Baltic postal arrangements in Baltic. This one's a little bit strange. It's been sent to Thirsk, Yorkshire. It's at sixpence, and it's sent to the mother of an engineer called Rux Evelyn Bell Compton, and he also travelled. He was a young lad. And he travelled to the Crimea on one of his uncle's ships later in the war. And he kept forever afterwards claiming the Crimean Medal and claimed to be the last survivor of the Crimean War because he went out as a cabin boy and he died in 1940. But he was the War Office said he was not entitled to it, so he didn't get it. The one on the right-hand side is a bit of a strange one. It's 1854. It's just got a single penny stamp stuck on it, yet it's sent to a captain in London, United Services Club in London. So presumably a military captain, though I don't know that. It was originally charged an additional 1 penny. So I'm not sure why that, which was crossed out, and then it was 4pence. I suspect that they were treating it as a concession rate of 3pence, but they'd only stuck a penny on it, so it then owed a further 2pence. But in this case, they penalised them, the recipient, by doubling the charge to 4pence, which is quite unusual. But they probably thought they were, like Mrs. Knowles, they probably thought they were trying to book the system. That's the only thing I can think of. There was a 5-penny rate from the Baltic, but that was soldiers and seamen, and it was much earlier than this. So I think that's the reason behind that one, that the post office has penalised them by doubling the charge for the 2pence. So the fleet came back to Kiel, or went back to Britain in the autumn of 1854. So this is being sent via Kiel and Hamburg. It's the side bottom correspondence, which is a major correspondence. And so that's sent during the winter. And some of the fleet came back to Britain and some was stayed at the port of Kiel. So we get to later 1855, and this is what the Danzig letters usually look like. And 3-penny stamps, just like with the Crimea, the Black Sea mail, although they didn't have a post office British Army, it was just posted, and then there's a receiving stamp. 1855 and 1856. This letter, although it looks pretty boring, and it's going to be sent unpaid again to Mrs. Sidebottom, and it's just got the 3pence on it. It's probably one of the last pieces of mail from the Baltic during the Crimean War. It's actually the fleet either to England and England. So he's on, the husband's on his way home. And so if you look at the date at the bottom, December 4th, 1855. And most of the fleets had gone home by mid-November. The one on the right is civilian mail, sent via Aachen and sent to St. Petersburg via Prussia. If I remember right, it's sent from Hull. Oh, it's sent from Liverpool. Sorry, it's sent from Liverpool, and it's a merchant talking about sending articles to St. Petersburg. I think it might be Con, but I'm not sure. were sending merchandise to St. Petersburg, but going via the port of Memel, which I think was in Prussia at the time, thereby circumventing the blockade. So merchants were happily circumventing the blockade by going via Prussia, but letting the goods go via Prussia into Russia, while the British and Flemish fleets were blockading the Gulf of Finland. This is a less known area of the war, the Pacific, and it didn't start very well for the British and the French, well, particularly the British, because when they were going to assault the fort at Petropavlovsk, scouting the Russian in the Siberia, in the northern Pacific Ocean, on the day that they were going to assault it, the British Admiral Price shot himself, either intentionally or accidentally, we're not sure. But it was very unfortunate, so they had to send a new admiral out. What's his name? I think it was Bryce or something like that. And he had his flagship at HMS Monarch. And the British used the Valparaiso and Callao in Peru and Chile to send the mail home. This has cost 2 shillings, and it's been sent from Callao in Peru to Brighton on the south coast of England. And later on, they set up a base in Canada to make it easier to send mail. But the point is, it would then have to cross Canada, I don't know what the route was, whether it went by the United States, went across Canada, or in this case, I think what happened was in this earlier mail from Callao possibly went across Panama and was picked up there. I think that would be the route. And then but the post, there is only the postmarks for Britain, I'm afraid. So I can't say definite. So I think this probably went across the Isthmus of Panama and was picked up by a ship there. But later on, as I said, they used Canada, west coast of Canada, as a base. Right, allies and enemies. I've got quite a lot of French mail, though I'm not only showing a tiny bit here. Here we are. It was originally 25 cents, the mail from the Crimea, and this was before the agreement with the British. So this is the French mail. In this case, what France did, they had various officers, bureau, and this one's particularly, it's not easy to see on that one, but it's better on the other one, on the one on the right. So this is 25 centimes, unpaid. So ours were generally written on it. This was stamped. The one on the right hand side, you may be able to see that a bit better because it says BAUA, B-A-U-A, on the obverse, and this has 2 25 centime stamps to cancel it. This is because it's chargé, so it's equivalent to registered, and so it did the 25 centimes for the postage and 25 centimes to the charge. And again, another thing about French mail that's chargé is that it often had a lot of seals over it for security, and you can see others have stampings on it. You can see where they stuck on it on the reverse of that. So that rate only lasted up till the agreement with the British at the end of May 1854. The unpaid rate on the French mail went up to 30 centimes, but the prepaid rate went down to 20 centimes. So here we are. You can see this is Bureau C. Quite early in the war, if I remember correctly. I think it's 1854. But that's got the 13 centimes cancellation. And the one on the right again, it's going to Camiesh, which is the main French port. It's going out from France, but they still cancelled it. It's got Quartier Gal, so it's gone to headquarters, and then it's gone to the First Corps headquarters. You'd have to see it upside down, but it's Quartier Gal and Premier Corps. Now, so all these say Armée de l'Orient for the military forces of France. So and you get cancellations on when they were received in the Crimea, unlike the British, which didn't cancel when received in the Crimea. But so it gives you a good idea of the postage route and when it was received. But they did the office in both directions. So when it was posted to France, they all still cancelled it with the office, and it was then sent to Marseille. There are also some named French ships that use their own cancellations. I haven't got a copy of these or any of these at the moment, but because they are quite scarce. These two envelopes show the naval French cancellation, Escadre de la Méditerranée or the Mediterranean. It's various combinations. And what's unusual about these two is they've gone into the British system and then possibly been transferred at Constantinople separately and gone into the French postal system. This first one, on the left-hand side, is a major area of correspondence to Lady Mallet, who was the wife of the British consul in Frankfurt. I think it was Sir George Mallet. I can't remember his first name was anyway, but he was consul in Frankfurt, and I think their son was in the Grenadier Guards. So that's that route. It's not easy to see what the cancel looks like an 11, but I'm not certain whether that was 11pence. I think possibly 11pence, but because it's routed via France into Germany, so there'd be certain amounts to the French post office, certain amount presumably to the German post office, and obviously the British military. The other one on the right-hand side is more straightforward. This went to a girls' school in Boulogne, and an academy for young ladies in Boulogne. And again, it went into the British Army postal system and then into the French naval postal system. But as it was only going to France, it just got the 20. It just paid the 20 cents. This is the Sardinian, because bear in mind, Sardinia was in northern Italy. It was what we call Piedmont. Capital was Turin, so it was Piedmont and the island of Sardinia. And later on, Italy united under the Sardinians to become the king. The king of Sardinia became the king of Italy. That's a moment. So, sorry. So this has a special cancel, which is Posta Militare Sarda. It's not very clear on these ones. It's a little clearer on the right hand side. So that's a cancelled one, and both going out to the. I think that's going out to the Crimea. See, it's not easy to see. The first one is, and the second one, I think it's 9 or 90 cents. It looks like a 9, but I'm not certain. But you can clearly see the Posta Militare Sarda on the top right-hand side of the unstamped envelope. It's a lot clearer cancellation. These tend to be quite expensive, but I've got a modest collection of these. Turkish contingents, bear in mind, so Turkey was our allies. A lot of Turkish troops had British officers, though, and the British often didn't think much of the quality of the Turkish troops, but I think that was a bit of snobbishness, but because they generally regarded as fighting very well when they were properly supplied. But the one on the left-hand side is to the Superintendent Land Transport Corps, Land Transport Service, Turkish contingent at Kesh. Kesh is a town on the eastern end of the Crimean Peninsula, which was captured by the British, French and Turks in the middle of 1855. It was looted basically, and the Russians withdrew, and there was a lot of damage done. But it was basically looted. But they set up a base there to control the Sea of Azov as operations went up into the Sea of Azov, which is north of the Black Sea. Interesting though, not only Kerch, he said Constantinople, it said Crimea or elsewhere. So they didn't exactly know where he was going to be. Another point also about the Land Transport Corps or Land Transport Service, although I'm not sure exactly, is that they originally, because they weren't officially British Army soldiers, at the beginning of the war, the officers particularly had to pay the full rate of postage. And there was a big fuss over this because it was such an important job. And eventually they were allowed the concession rate, but it was rather grudgingly given to them by the War Office and the Post Office in agreement. The second letter, which I was really, really happy to get, was from Erzurum or Erzurum in eastern Turkey. And it's it's some Turkish military under British officers, and it's been sent in the diplomatic bag and posted in London. So just charge tuppence, as he actually says he's going to send it in the diplomatic bag in the letter. And it's a really good letter talking about the supplies and such like. And as I said, if they were well led and well supplied, Turkish troops did very well. And such that they were besieged in the city of Kars and in a similar, a bit north of Erzurum, and they fought very well, although they eventually ran out of supplies. What's interesting about this letter is that it's actually got some Turkish on it. If you look at the top right of the envelope, there's a lot of squiggle, which somebody thought was said Admiralty, but it didn't. It's actually to England in Old Ottoman, in the Old Ottoman script. So the Russians, our enemies. So the first one is a letter from Sevastopol to Odessa, to the consul of the Kingdom of Two Sicilies in the Crimea, in Odessa. Now, the Two Sicilies is the bottom chunk of Italy, which is Sicily and the southern part of the Italian peninsula, when its capital was at Naples. And there'd been a famine there, and the Crimea and the Ukraine, like it is now, was the breadbasket of Russia and a good chunk of Europe. So this is from a merchant buying grain, and he's held up due to documentation, and he's basically needed to purchase the grain, and he couldn't do it because the Russians have been a bit bureaucratic and arrested him. So he's writing to the consul to try and get him out. The grain, as I said, was needed because of a shortage, and the king of the Two Sicilies was waiving all charges. The cancellation at the top says it's received. It's received stamp. Wait a moment. Don't say the date. See if I can read the Russian. Just excuse me. I think it might be June, but I won't swear to it. It's obviously in Russian, but my Russian isn't that great. The cover on the right, I was pleased to get hold of. It's actually sent from Sevastopol, probably during the siege. It's been halted by hand, but I think it is legitimate. So it says Sevastopol, the square cancellation says Sevastopol in Russian, and it's January 1854, altered to 1855. Now, if you think about Sevastopol being under siege, they wouldn't necessarily get the correct cancellations all at once. So I do think it is a legitimate postmark, and it's sent to a town called Penza, which is in the Ukraine, north of the Crimean Peninsula, and it's sent to Captain Andrei Frankovich Delivron, and he commanded sailors and marines in Sevastopol, and he retired to Penza in early 1855, because as I said, if you remember, right at the start of the war, the main army withdrew. So he did a good job and took retirement. In the Baltic, this one's a quite interesting letter from Vyborg, north of St. Petersburg. It's to His Highness Alexis Seminovich, to Peter at St. Petersburg in the Ismailovsky Regiment, 8th Street, in the house of a merchant. Now, basically, it's Alexis Seminovich Akimov. He was a shipbuilder for the Russian Imperial Navy, a participant in defense of Sevastopol, a bridge builder, inspector of shipbuilding, works in the port of Mykolaiv, and a major general of the ship's engineers corps. So what's he doing in in Finland? So, and relating to Finland. So he's obviously something to do with the war and military engineering. So it is quite significant. I just wish I had the letter. It is quite significant. So, wait a moment. Yeah. I think that's been charged 10 kopecks, if I remember correctly. Now they've got the Austrians. What happened with Austria is that she stayed neutral, but she influenced the war, because when the Russians withdrew from Turkish territory, Austria came in as peacemaker. So you get the Austrian military in effect influencing the war, even though they didn't fight it. They stopped Russia coming back into Turkey, which allowed the British and French to go to the Crimea. So this is sent to Bucharest, to the, wait a moment. It's to the Austrian headquarters in Bucharest in Wallachia, because it was the Turkish provinces of Moldavia and Wallachia. And if you see the cancellation, it says KUK, post-stamped number 1. That's the military post office in Bucharest. And I can't remember who it's sent to, but I know that he was killed in the 6-week war in the 1860s. I'm trying to remember what his name was. I apologize for that. The one on the right hand side is a civilian letter sent from Jatsy in Moldavia to Paris, and it showed how much, even in the wilds of Moldavia, that there was a lot of banking going on there. It's got the cancellation. I mean, obviously, presumably, Rothschilds are supplying merchants, troops, anything else out there. So it shows the amount of activity there, that the Rothschilds were interested in it. So other mail associated with the war. Change to Atlantic shipping. So this is 8 decimes, and it's gone from New York and it's gone to Cognac in France. There's a heck of a lot of mail in the Crimean War that relates to drink. It's cognac for the Americans here, but there's also the firm of Noilly Pratt in Marseille supplied a lot of drink out to the Crimea and to Constantinople. I've got a huge order. When they've had captured for Sevastopol, they needed to replace all the drink that they'd drunk to celebrate. This particular one, though, refers to shipping. And it's talking about that he wishes it's come by the steamer Asia, which is the Cunard steamer, but a slow one. And it went via London, as did this letter, and he wishes it had arrived earlier. And he's hoping it'll arrive by the Collins steamer, due to arrive on Thursday. And he said, my disappointment regarding the delay. So mail was disrupted, and this demonstrates how some American companies took advantage of it. Problem with the Collins line, though, is that they were a bit unlucky in that they lost 2 ships. The Arctic collided with another ship and sank, and it included Collins' wife, and 2 or 3 of his children were lost. And the Pacific, sailing from Liverpool, disappeared totally, and no one knows what happened to it. But they found a bottle and said that it had collided with an iceberg and was sinking, and so it put a short note in a bottle. Well, that's all we know of the liner Pacific, because it disappeared and there were no wireless in those days. Another aspect of the war was the peace envelopes. And because not everyone supported the war, and it may have had an influence on why the war was fought in the 1850s and not in the 1840s, because it wasn't the first time that Russia had occupied Moldavia and Wallachia, these provinces of Turkey. And it may be that the peace movement had delayed British and French action in it. The one on the left-hand side, it was actually used in 1852, but these continued to be used very intermittently throughout the war. And it does have an American collection because it was produced by Elihu Burritt, and it was for the League of Universal Brotherhood in Britain, but he was from Connecticut, if I remember correctly, and he was a blacksmith, but then he started a number of he went for a number of themes. He was pro-emancipation, fairly obviously, but he also led the American Peace Society. Then they had a fallout over how extreme the American Peace Society would be, and Elihu Burritt came across to the UK and started preaching around the UK. And he went walking around particular areas in the south of England, and as I said, they got the League of Universal Brotherhood, and they started issuing these envelopes. And he then went on also to the Ocean Penny Post and wanted postage to be a lot cheaper than it was. So he was basically, and he was also then later on an American consul. From Abraham Lincoln made him an American consul in, I think, Liverpool, and he was consul right through the presidency of Andrew Johnson. It was only when Grant came to the presidency that he was removed. And so he was quite influential. The other one is another peace envelope. That's not to do with Elihu Burritt, but it says, nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore. This is sent to Glasgow, from Glasgow to a priest who'd taken his family, who'd literally just taken his family out before the war, out to Vermont, and they were just settling into Vermont. Both of these used are quite rare. There are some reprints of both of them, unused or used later in the century, but they're used in the 1850s. They are quite rare. And finally, we've got a royal connection here, and it's been sent by Prince Albert. It's been originally sent out to His Royal Highness Prince Albert's at Osborne House on the Isle of Wight, and it's been sent back by Lord Hardinge, the Commander-in-Chief in London, the military Commander-in-Chief. And Prince Albert signed it and returned it to him. So it's nice. It's grubby. It's a grubby piece of paper, but it's got a nice signature by Prince Albert. So I'm sorry it's been a bit disjointed, but I hope you've enjoyed what I've had to say. And well, any questions? I'll do my best to answer. We'll see how we go.
That was fantastic. Again, I'm just amazed with the material and the, just the personalities involved with the war. I'm going to turn it over to Rob to ask some questions. In the meantime, I'm going to start bringing you over. If you would kindly just raise your hand if you'd like priority. And if you don't, I'm going to probably bug you a couple times, but eventually I'll just stop bugging you.
Wonderful presentation, Adrian. Thank you for that.
Oh, thanks.
We've got a question from an anonymous attendee. Why did soldiers have to pay postage in the first place? Was there ever an army where they did not charge soldiers for postage?
No, that's a know of. It's funny because, MPs could send it free, but soldiers couldn't. So members of parliament, should I say, could send mail for free at one time anyway, but soldiers couldn't. And it was originally brought in under the Duke of, right in the late 18th century, and the Duke of Wellington promoted it in the Napoleonic Wars on the basis that it would raise morale. But no, they still had to pay a charge, and that was it for a penny. I think they possibly thought that if they didn't charge, they would incur a cost. So the post office still had to be run at a profit as far as possible. So no, I don't think they did ever do it free. I'm not sure about later wars, but I don't think so even then. It's my knowledge, because I know in the Civil War that the post office is charged.
Did the Postal Service benefit from the war?
I don't know. I think so, because I'd have to check the accounts. Basically, there were 300,000 letters sent from the Crimea in 1855 alone. I think there were 200,000 sent in 1854. Just to put it in context, there are about 1,200 sent in 1854 at the penny rate. So it was used by both officers and soldiers at the threepence rate because it was more reliable. Because, as I said, if you sent it at the penny rate, it was put on a ship. If that ship stopped in Malta for some reason or was sent elsewhere, it was a bit potluck when you got that mail delivered. They did deliver it eventually, but there were no guarantees. Whereas if you posted it for threepence from Turkey, it took about 10 days via the French post. Well, it cost 3 times as much, obviously.
Hmm.
And also there was hundreds of thousands of mail coming out the other way. So I can't, I don't know, to be honest, but I would guess the post office didn't lose that much by it if they lost at all because of the amount of mail that was sent.
I've got a question of my own here. I'm trying to have a picture of what it was like in theater. Were the Allied forces kept discreet, like were the French in their own area and the British in their own area?
Generally speaking, yes.
And did they all use the common post offices that you showed on the map?
No, the French had the French. It's slightly more complicated. It was explained more in the first one. I've tried to cut it a bit short, but the French post office was at Camiesh, the airport, whereas the British was at Balaclava and at headquarters.
Okay.
But sometimes the British especially when the Balaclava was congested and it was difficult for ships to sail, the British sent their mail by wagon over to Camiesh to be put on a French ship, and even some English ships sailed from Camiesh, so it was a bit ad hoc. Officially, it was from Balaclava, because that's where the post office was. But I think it depended on the situation at the time as to what the situation was in Balaclava. And
Mhm.
Kamiesh was a much better port than Balaclava was, as the British found out when the war continued. And it was, if you look at a map of Balaclava, it's a long, thin, narrow inlet surrounded by very high hills, which caused great problems getting mail to the soldiers and getting supplies to the soldiers, particularly in the early part of 1855. So it's not an ideal spot, as they discovered, but I think they were too late to move it. But the British did use Kamiesh as well.
Okay. Strategically, did these armies did they merge in any way, or were they separate and performing their own operations in field?
They didn't merge officially, but they helped each other out. For example, the charge of the Light Brigade, which is perhaps a bit of the Crimean War that most have heard of.
Yeah, right.
It's performed by the Light Brigade, but French Chasseurs d'Afrique supported them on the left-hand side of the Valley of Death. I think they actually drove some of the Russian artillerymen out, and it allowed some of the Light Brigade to come back. So that was French Chasseurs d'Afrique helped them out. Again, at the Battle of Inkerman, General Bosquet brought his regiments up to support the British when the Russians were pressuring them. They attacked under cover of fog, and it got pretty dicey for a while. In fact, one of the senior commanders, British General Cathcart, was killed defending an area in front of headquarters, not directly in front of headquarters, but on the way there to keep the Russians out. And it was luckily that the General Bosquet, I don't know how many troops he brought up. I think it was 2 divisions, but I might be over egging it. But he plugged the line, so to speak, and enabled the British to fight the Russians off. We were doing a good job doing a good job ourselves, but it strengthened the defences, and it was very useful. Equally, the British supported the French, but in the French view, they didn't support them as well, because the French attacked in June. The French attacked the Redan, which was a bastion, and the British they attacked the Malakoff, which was another bastion. The British were supposed to support them, but because of mix-up in orders, the British didn't. The French went early, and the British went late, and the British got, whereas the French actually got there to their objective, the British didn't get to there, suffered a huge amount of casualties, and were fought off. So the French themselves had to retreat, and because of the casualties, some of them blame Lord Raglan, and it said he died within a week of this, and they said he died of a broken heart. It was probably dysentery, but his mental state didn't exactly help matters, because some of the troops swore at him, which probably wasn't fair, because he had to help the French, he had to help his allies, but he sacrificed his army to help part of his army to help the allies. Sorry, you gave me to militarist. I hope I'm not going on too much. Well, so yeah, they were separate but interlinked. And generally speaking, originally at least, the commanders spoke the other's language. I'm not sure whether General Pelissier spoke English or not, but they tried to coordinate, but they were kept separate.
All right. We have a question from John Deegan. He says that he's got a cover from Belfast on the 3-penny rate going to a Dr. Surgeon Robert Templeton in Balaclava in July of 1856. The war was finished, but the hospital must have still been working. His question, what is the last date that you have seen?
Right, it's slightly more complicated than that. It's never simple. The Crimean, well, I think I've got a couple. If you want to, I'm willing. Anybody who wants to contact me directly, please, you're welcome to give them my email address. I've got a couple of Templeton covers and they are quite late. What happened is that the concession rate continued, I think, until about the 14th of September because there was still a lot of troops out there. The British actually they closed the post office down at Balaclava on the 10th of July, and they evacuated the Crimea. The Commander-in-Chief, Sir William Codrington, left the Crimea with his staff on the 12th of July, 1856. So that's when we actually left. I think the French had left earlier. But there were still troops coming to Constantinople, so that the concession rate, and there were also still troops at the hospitals, so that the concession rates continued until September when they were withdrawn.
Right. Jean Samard, you have a question? You have to unmute.
Oh, I'm sorry.
There you go.
Same thing. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. But you can't see me, can you?
No.
The
There
question
we go.
The question is on a soldier who's deceased, who died on the battlefield and receives a letter. How is that treated?
Oh,
What happened to that letter?
I would presume, and I'm making an assumption that it would have been returned, but I've no evidence that. I think she's on this meeting. A lady, a friend of mine, and she had she's been researching a driver who died of fever in the Crimea. I've not got any obvious evidence of the letter being returned, but I mean, I think it would depend whether there would a return address on it, just like there is today. Otherwise, it would go to a dead letter office. I can't think. It's possible that they went to I would suspect it went to the commanding officer of that soldier. That would be the logical place. Now, whether there was then efforts to send the letter back, I don't know. With regard to officers, a lot of officers had friends who took any letters back or returned any letters and took their last words or anything that I have got some where the person wrote the letter because a lot of troops, thought they might die or they were feeling ill, and they wrote to the families just in case they died. Because I've got a letter that he sent, and there is a note that he did die, and I've got another one. He sent a letter, and it turns out he was wounded. But they usually said for somebody to look after their effects. And if they didn't, then presumably the quartermaster, I would say probably the quartermaster would have possibly taken care of it. But I've not got, I'm trying to remember now. You've got me thinking. It's a good question.
Yeah,
You've got me thinking. Yeah, you've got me thinking about, I don't know whether I've actually got any that's actually, I have got one that's turned, but it's only an envelope. So I've not researched whether it's basically, it's gone out there. And then somebody stuck tamps on it and sent it back again. I should have shown that because it's quite an interesting envelope. Yeah. And but I think that's just turned. And without knowing the letter and what happened to the person, I can't say that's the person's died. You've got me really thinking. I'm trying to think. I've not got any letters with anybody who wrote deceased on it or anything like that and sent back, and as far as I know, but I'd have to look it up, to be fair.
Thank you very much.
All right. Dennis Doran, you've got a question?
Yeah. Yes, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, thank you. Yes, so I have actually two small comments. The last time we had this event, which was in October, I believe, one of the auditor asked if there was a letter going to India that was related to the to the war,
Yes,
and there is, okay?
yes, there
Um,
is.
I mentioned it to the person afterwards, but it was too late to answer the question because things were already rolled down. So the letter to India came from Sebastopol, Crimea, to India in 1854 from the 2nd Dragoons Army in Crimea and Malta, CDS plus tax. Anyway, marking and then on entire letter dated camp 8 miles from Sebastopol, 29th of September, 1854 to Bengal, India. So I
Yeah.
just wanted to make sure that that gentleman who asked a question at least gets an answer.
Yeah, I don't know whether it's the same letter, but there is a dealer in a British dealer called Martin Townsend actually does have one out to India. It's got damage, but he does have one for sale. It's not cheap, but I'm just saying
I know.
because they
I
are
would-
rare. Now, whether that's the same
Yeah.
letter that you've spoken about or another one, I don't know because I can't remember
Yeah.
what his letter's like.
Yes. And my second comment actually has to do with not just I think your exposure, your presentation was excellent. You touched on Austria, Sardinia, French, and the Baltic countries and so on.
Yes.
But there was a definite lack onto the Turkish army postal history. And I
Yeah,
know that your emphasis is on the British Empire, but my field of philately is really more towards the Ottoman Empire. So I just wanted to mention that.
Yeah.
It would have been nice to
I-
have a little bit more.
I would love to. I would love to, but any Turkish mail is very expensive.
I agree.
Also, it's not
Very.
easy. So it is extremely expensive, and I've got relatively limited means, I'm afraid. The only other bit of Turkish item is that I've got a Turkish medal that's given to a doctor, and it's signed in gold by Omar Pasha. I was pleased to get that,
Oh.
but it's not really postal. The only other postal, I said, the only postal one I've got at is from Erzurum, but again, it's not the Turkish army because a lot of the Turkish troops were illiterate. I mean, obviously, the officers weren't, I'm sure, but
Yeah.
it's difficult to read. B, I mean, I haven't actually got a book on Old Ottoman. I had to do that to read that bit on the documents, and I also asked someone else.
Yeah.
But it is the ones that do survive. And again, Turkey, like Russia has, Turkey's gone through a heck of a lot of changes since the Crimean War. So the survival rate is low, even when you've got them, and they are very expensive. I think you're probably talking a 4-figure sum for that. I'd have to look it up on the Pierre de Vabrin had some, but I would have to look it up.
Dennis, if that's your area and you could fill that block, we'd have, I could connect with you after lunch and maybe we could arrange a talk to make this give a more complete story.
Yeah. Sorry. Oh, I was just going to say also, if he wants to contact me, I could send I've actually got the Piat de Vavrin catalogue, and I could probably show the Turkish letters that were in there. I mean, obviously, it's a few years ago now. It's nearly 10 years ago, but that was one of the major sales. So if you want more information on what Turkish letters have been sold at auction, I could probably send it you.
Excellent.
Sounds like
Thank you.
kismet.
I think Chris Savage, you had your hand up, and then did we tire you out?
No, not at all. Oh, wait a minute.
Am I muted? No.
No.
No,
okay.
we could hear you.
No, really, I was just interested in Adrian's comment with regards to letters of soldiers that had died. Was there any official correspondence from the authorities in the different parts of this Crimean War geography that was sent to families when soldiers did die?
Not that I know of. I know what you're thinking of, because in Britain they used to, obviously I don't know about US, but I know in Britain in the First World War they used to send what they call a death plaque and a printed letter. I don't think so, because the letters home from soldiers where somebody died, they just say sort of saying that they died. Now, I know Florence Nightingale used to write home if somebody died at her hospital, and possibly commanding officers, well, not possible, certainly commanding officers and brother officers wrote home when an officer died. Bear in mind, most mail we have is from the officer class. Very little is from the troops.
Right.
Now, there are official documents, letters to the War Office and such like, but I've never seen anything that has been formally no printed letters that someone's died. They would be quite common if they did exist. So I don't think they exist. I think it was all ad hoc. And
right. Well, given the number of troops that died, you would have thought, yes, it would be pretty common correspondence. So it's interesting because essentially you went out to fight these wars, you got shot and killed, and that was the last anybody ever heard of you by all accounts.
Well, you've got a grave. They must have been notified. There is somebody.
So there's nothing in Somerset House or in Kew or something. I
know there is somebody. I don't know whether she's on here, but as I said, this driver died, and he was a driver. He wasn't very senior, and he'd sent letters home, and he went and died of fever. Now, whether the hospital notified the family or not, but he was from town of Bristol, and there was a piece in the local Bristol paper that he died, and he wasn't an officer; he was just a driver. He drove artillery or a wagon and such like.
All right.
Yeah. The Bristol paper found out about it, so there must have been. Firstly, also there are War Office records. So the War Office. And you can get they're online now, so you can actually get them. The army records, and it was on a soldier's record that they died. So basically, regiments would have sent returns of soldiers dying back to the War Office, presumably via Constantinople. So they will be on the statistics that they died. But as far as I know, I've never seen a formal printed letter from the War Office that somebody died, like occurred in the First and Second World Wars,
right.
A telegram. But so I'm, as I said, it's a good question, but I don't know exactly. There was somewhere, I said, there were regimental returns of soldiers, because obviously they had to have casualty returns for each regiment, and the medical boards, again, their records, and hospitals records. So there were certainly those. But I think the work was probably put out to somebody in the regiment to write to relatives if the relatives were known.
Right. Okay.
But it's conjecture. I don't know for certain.
Yeah. Anyway, Adrian, thanks very much. Great presentation. Enjoyed it thoroughly.
Thank you.
Mark Boyce.
Yes, I have a follow-up on that last question. I have a cover addressed to Mrs. Miller in Dublin, and it's from Assistant Surgeon Miller of the 77th Regiment Army in the last, meaning that he had died. Now,
Yeah.
I don't know if he had already written this letter and it was being forwarded to Mrs. Miller. My guess is, and there's no contents in the envelope. but my guess is that it was a notice to Mrs. Miller that Assistant Surgeon Miller had died.
Yeah, I don't know whether you attended the first talk. I've got one. I got one of those that was sent to London and then to a lady at a hotel in Paris, and that's also labelled the last. So I wonder that's a good conjecture. I haven't been able to find the soldier it was sent from. But I've got a number from Surgeon Miller. If you've got, I'd like to see that cover if it's possible. If somebody could be emailing me, I said I'm happy for my email address to be given out, and I would like to see it because I said I've got them catalogued, so they're all in order. So I would like to see that letter if that's possible, and I'll do a bit of so not letter, the envelope. And
I have a scan. Yes, I can send that to you.
Thank you very much.
Well, get me your email address. But I had another question. And that was, I have a cover from England to Crimea, franked with a 6-pence stamp. Was that a heavy one, or?
It would likely be a heavy one, yes, between quarter and half an ounce. If you see some, like our old airmail paper that you used to have when we sent letters, it's like you get some very flimsy paper, so you could get more sheets in. So it's perhaps on thicker paper. So yes, it would be between quarter and half an ounce. The 6-penny stamp had only just been introduced. Now, I don't think it was actually introduced for soldiers' mail to and from the Crimea. I think it was going to be introduced anyway, but it had only come in March 1854, the 6-penny rate. So I'm trying to remember whether they certainly took some out to the Crimea, but I'm not sure when they did it, because they certainly took penny and tuppence stamps out when the postmasters went out in May 1854. They took some stamps with them because they were a bit chaotic. But I can't remember whether they took any 6pences. I'd have to look it up.
Mark, I'll send you Adrian's email address after
Thank
the
you.
program.
Yep.
Adrian, you're going to have your hands full with all these.
I don't mind. I love it. As I said, as I told you, I've got tomorrow off, luckily, because it's late here. So, well, I appreciate people getting up to listen to it. So, thank you.
Yeah, I think there was one question in the chat that you may or may not have covered, and it was about the soldiers, with the bones. Was there a cemetery in the Crimea for the British military?
Oof. There's certainly cemeteries around Constantinople. I know that. I'm fairly sure that there are cemeteries in the Crimea. Yes. I don't know. I don't know whether we've got any historians on here. I've certainly not been out to the Crimea, but yes, there are cemeteries there. Well, I'm not. There are certainly cemeteries around Constantinople. I would presume there are cemeteries in Bulgaria, because a lot of them were dying in Bulgaria before they went to the Crimea. And the French. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. They were just wondering if they would transport the deceased back to. No, they would.
No, I don't think. I mean, I'm not saying they didn't in some cases, but I'm certainly didn't, because there's a big Crimea memorial out near Constantinople as well. So I don't know what the situation is with cemeteries in the Crimea itself, but I mean, the French army we lost a lot of men in early 1855, and the French lost a lot of men they got typhoid in early 1856, and they wouldn't be practical to transport them back, because refrigeration was, as far as I know, non-existent at the time. And they got other things. They got the life soldiers to transport back.
All right. Louis Morel.
Thank you, Rob. Adrian, I have a particular interest in the Crimean War, which is tangential to what you do. But since we're talking about the mortality during the war, can you or anyone else here in this panel talk about what percentage of the soldiers, whether they were British or from some other expeditionary force, died from malaria? And I have a reason for asking this.
I can't answer that. I do know that there is a book, it's on Amazon by, I think it's Michael Hinton, that deals with statistics of death from various diseases. I'm happy to send you a link again if I get your email address.
Sure.
There is a group on the Crimean War on Google. No, oh, what's his? Oh, Yahoo Groups, I think. And that's a group of Crimean War specialists who know much more than I do, and they're very knowledgeable and very, very helpful, and much more specialist than I am. But as I said, that's one book that I think you'd find interesting. And as I said, if you've got any specific questions, there'll be somebody there to answer it. So I'm happy to send details if you if you want to, if somebody contacts me. I mean, there may be somebody from that group on here. I know it's been this talk has been raised, so I hope I've done them justice, because they know more than I do.
Thank you.
Jean Simard. You have to unmute.
Sorry, is there any Winston Churchill correspondence in somebody's collection that's noticeably worth talking about?
I'm a bit unsure how that connects with the Crimea. The Winston Churchill. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, Winston Churchill in the Crimea. Is there anything?
No, because he wasn't born. He was born.
He was more the Boer War, wasn't he?
Is the Boer War?
Sorry. Okay, I
They
got
often, no, it's all right. No, don't blur. Right, no, the Crimean War's 1850s. The Boer War is the 1890s. They offered a £25 reward for his capture because he was an amateur journalist in the Boer War.
All right, sorry.
No, that's all right. He was in his 20s in the Boer War.
He had a lot to do with the Dardanelles.
He did. Yes, one of his big mistakes. I think he resigned from the government after that for a bit. Well, they brought it back in again.
Adrian, the cover that you showed that was addressed to the Rothschild, did that have a letter accompanying it?
Oof. I think it's an entire, yeah.
My reason for asking is, in identifying these Crimean War pieces in that, if you don't have the postmarks, I suppose you're dead in the water if you don't have a letter.
Usually, yeah. I mean, I love the letters. That's why I started with the Postal History, but I think that's a movement in philately generally now. People are starting to, or at least with Postal History, it's not just about the envelopes. You can get so much more.
Oh yeah.
By having the letters, even though why it was sent and who and when it was posted, and I gave an example in the first part of I had a letter and it wasn't clear where it was sent from, and it had a 1 shilling and 9p charge, and it was only when I got another letter with a 1 shilling and a penny charge. I'm sorry about the old British currency. I'll work around it, but it was sent from the same person to the same person, and it was just envelope. But I was able to, the other letter had a definite link to the Crimea, whereas the first one didn't. But because of when they were sent, I was able to link the two up. And so I knew that the other one was definitely a Crimean War-related letter. So I just love it's detective work, and I just feel that having the letters much better. But if you don't, it's sometimes you can still work out things. For example, a senior officer sent a letter to his wife on a particular date from Constantinople, and it's only when I researched him I found that he got promotion on the day before. So he's obviously writing to his wife about his promotion. So you
Yeah.
can sometimes work out what's in the letter.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. Yeah.
Well, I like to get letters where I can. And all right, yes, the best way to make money theoretically is to split the letter from the cover, sell the letter to the historians and the cover to the philatelists. But I think it's sacrilege. It's a bit like where people get atlases and take out the maps. That's sacrilege as well. But it is the way to make most money. But I won't do that. If I've got a letter with it, I'll if I ever sell them, I'll keep them together, because I don't think it's right not to. But sometimes I have tracked down the letter, like the Florence Nightingale one. I think, though I'm not 100% certain, that I've tracked down the letter or a copy in an archive online that went in that envelope, and that's where the Crimean War Yahoo group was really helpful in that, because a chap who'd written a biography of Florence Nightingale was able to tell me, right, I think that's the letter, what's in it? And he showed me where it was. And I was able to find, I mean, obviously I didn't have the actual letter, I just had a copy of it, but it makes it much more interesting if you can match them up.
I think a
Sounds
lot
like
of
we-
museums, when they're going through their holdings, they're concerned more about the letter for research than they are the written letter, opposed to the envelope that it came into.
I think they all form a part. I think the envelope's just as important, in my view, in that, yeah, I mean, obviously it's nice to have a letter, but it's like having flesh on the bones. I mean, it's, you know, the envelope's interesting to a point, but you much prefer the letter as well. But equally, if you've just got if you've got the letter, well, I think the envelope shows its journey, and I think it adds a lot to it. It makes a whole. It adds value. And you know, all right, some people cynically might split them up, and it is the best way to make money, depending on the direction you sell them in. But it's sad, I'm afraid.
Yeah, you need the wisdom of King Solomon there to keep the baby whole.
Yeah, that's it. That's it precisely.
Adrian, a very, very entertaining display and presentation that's educated me somewhat.
Oh, thank you.
I liked it on the question of envelopes and contents. Then I think it's important to keep them together. I don't think that museums do justice to the whole aspect of it.
Yeah.
Museums tend to be interested in the historic bits and pieces, whereas postal historians are interested in the total story.
Yeah,
And
I'd agree with that.
that's very important.
I agree, definitely.
And as far as your Nightingale letter, if it goes anywhere, then clearly only release a photocopy. Keep the original.
Oh, I know. That's it. It's just that, you know, some people have done that to me. I said it's like the people who take atlases and then sell them page by page, because that's the way they make money. I mean, it's sacrilegious, but on the other hand, I suppose they can say that more people can get the actual item. But no, I don't want to split them up. I mean, they're all together at the moment, and that's how I want them to stay.
I think
I think
sometimes it's
that's-
uneducated people. You know, they're not focusing on the envelope. they're focusing on the letter. So it might not be purely, motivated by money.
True, I agree. But the point is, as I said, I feel they should keep them together as a whole. But I can understand why people don't. That's all I'll say. Because obviously, if you're an auctioneer, for example, you're trying to make money for your clients. So
Okay, I'll tell you, in the whole history of Armors, we have never split a letter out of an envelope.
all right, I'll be hand up.
No, I'm just saying that is just something that we wouldn't even think of doing. Okay, and I think if you talk to most auction houses, they would not even think of doing that, because that takes away the value, and it takes, like you said, it takes away the whole.
That's
And-
it.
And the
I-
provenance.
Yeah.
In all the years I've done this, I have never heard of, and we get a lot of rumors, someone actually going ahead and separating the envelopes from the letters and sending the letters one way and the envelopes another.
All right. So I hope I've not upset anybody.
No. I just wanted to, I wanted to just let people know that, auction houses, putting on my little auction house cap, and I think speaking for most dealers, like Mike, have you ever split up letters from envelopes?
No.
You dealer.
Uh,
Yeah, so I think you're gonna find most philatelic dealers, real dealers in auction houses really don't do that. It's more the uneducated historians that do that.
Or perhaps the investment people who aren't, just doing it, not the dedicated. No. I mean, I was actually saying, keep them together. I mean, I've just bought a 16th century letter, and the wrapper's actually still with it. It's amazing. The letter's in good nick, the wrapper isn't, but I was just pleased that the wrapper was still with it.
No offense. I didn't mean any offense. It was
No. I thought I didn't want to.
Right.
I didn't want to have caused offense. I was feeling a bit guilty about saying it, but
I know. Well, it happens. We see it a lot. But I just wanted to let you know the culprits are
that's
usually
fine.
not the auction houses or the dealers.
I certainly wasn't making accusations against anybody. I was just sort of saying that I wanted it kept together, but some people might think they could make more money by splitting it. That's all I was saying. Just like people split atlases up. Again, it's sacrilege, but that's my personal view. You should keep it all together.
It's just like they pull ads out of magazines.
Yeah, I mean, look at also the Victorians had a horrible habit of cutting signatures off the bottom and of letters and pasting them in albums. The number of Lord Raglan's signatures you see, I thought, well, what was the letter? What was he signing? and that's a sacrilege. The number of letters that's been destroyed in Victorian times because they wanted to stick the signature in the album, and they didn't want the letter, they just wanted the signature. Well, the signature's a signature, it tells nothing about that person. Well, that's what they did. So, lots of things have got lost.
Yeah. So that's very
As a 9-year-old child, no, sorry. Yeah, 9, yeah. I made my first visit to Stampex, and I had the princely sum of 5 shillings, which I spent all of it with one ancient, to my eyes, dealer. And I bought several envelopes with penny reds and tuppence blues on there. Was very pleased with myself. When I got back home, I sat down with my scissors and cut all the stamps off the envelopes.
Oh, dear. Oh, well.
Simply because I had nobody to guide me.
Oh, well,
Luckily, as the years went on, I learned a little bit, and
That's a good one, Mike.
that's just a bit of history that's fact and fun.
yeah, you live and learn. Really. Well, anyway, so it's a shame, but that's it. Look at envelopes you get where it's all been soaked off, or at least if it's been soaked off, you've lost the stamp, but you've still got the envelope. But tearing it, keeping the stamp is. Well, I say you live and learn. I'm sure we've all made mistakes.
You chime in.
Sorry,
You're muted.
Crimean, but I still have a bisect of the early Nova Scotia stamps that my father remembers as a young collector soaking off an envelope, which makes it totally worthless. But that would have been back in the 1930s. The bisect Nova Scotia stamp on a cover would be worth mega bucks today. But I've kept the bisect as a memory because of my dad, because he told me the story of how he'd done that.
Yeah,
yeah,
These things happen in life.
good
Oh,
story.
gosh.
Mark, you had your hand up earlier. You
Yes,
seem-
I have a couple more questions for Adrian, if it's all right.
Yeah.
First off, how is it that Russia had a port in Åland? You know, the Ramersund port that was part of the early assault by the English and French.
Sorry, wait, which port? Sorry, I apologize.
Åland, the Bommersund.
Oh yeah, Bomberson. Well, yeah, well that's I don't know who owned Bomberson first, but yes, that's it. It was a successful assault in late 1854. It may have been part of Finland, because bear in mind Finland was a Grand Duchy, and Finland was originally owned by Sweden, and it ended up with Russia after the Napoleonic Wars, and Sweden got, if I remember right, Sweden got Norway in exchange. Now, the Åland Islands, they guarded the entrance to the Gulf of Finland, so they didn't really like a Russian garrison there. So I think the garrison surrendered relatively easily. I think it was a bit of a hodgepodge. Again, it was a joint British and French operation, and they put up a bit of a fight, but it wasn't too bad, and it was seen as a bit of a propaganda victory as well for the British and French, because otherwise the fleet wasn't winning that many victories because it was blockading, and it was the most effective way it could have handled that. I actually have a letter that was sent by a merchant in St. Petersburg saying that he's having to send a peasant by land from one side of the Gulf of Finland to another, because he can't send him by sea because of the blockade. And so it was having a big effect on Russia. But as I said, they decided to remove the garrison from Bommersund because it was a bit of a nuisance, but I don't think it was exactly doing anything. It was it was more that they had to be seen to be doing something, because Admiral Sir Charles Napier was a man of action, and he rightly decided that he wasn't going to do much. Well, the government in London said, well, you've got all these battleships out there, these ships of the line, these steamships out there, and you're not doing anything with them. He says, well, I shouldn't be doing anything with them. They need to be a fleet in being to stop all trade from St. Petersburg and the Russian Baltic ports. And so when he came back in 1854, they relieved him of command and sent another admiral, Dundas, if I remember correctly, out again to the Baltic in 1855, and he did and again they demanded action. So he had to be seen to be doing something. So the fortress of what is now Helsinki, I think it's Helsingfors it was then, and that was Svalbard. They decided to attack that. They brought a lot of resources in and pummeled it. I don't think they occupied it or anything, but they had to be seen to be doing something. And I don't think it caused a lot of. They neutralised the fort by a bombardment, but I think that's all they really did. So the main effect was that they just blockaded. But when you're a government and you've got people asking you, you've got these warships out there, what are they doing? And they said, well, they sat there stopping merchant ships and it's also stopping the Russian Baltic fleet coming out from Kronstadt into the Baltic. So, but when you're a government, you want to be plain to the public. Of course, the newspapers were also saying, what is the Baltic fleet doing? And they said, well, it's blockading. Well, we want it to be doing something. These expensive steamships, they should be doing something. So they had to do something, even though it was strategically, it was largely irrelevant. So, they neutralised the fortress, but then what were they going to do? They didn't land. They only landed small amounts of troops in Finland, and they didn't actually stay there. They sailed off Kronstadt and decided it was too much to handle, and so they left it there with a bit of desultory firing at both ways, and then so that was that. But the main thing was that they stopped supplies getting into Russia, into St. Petersburg. And, the blockade could be circumvented to some degree, as I've already said, by a Memel or by other Prussian routes. But that was very inconvenient because it was overland and the Russian roads weren't notoriously good, or I should say were notoriously bad. And they had very few railways. I think they had a railway between Moscow and Petersburg, but I don't think they had any railways to the Crimea. And they eventually got a telegraph down to the Crimea. I think it was after we did it. I think it was about middle 1855 when Russia got it down there, because that was a long job, hundreds of miles from Moscow and St. Petersburg, even further from St. Petersburg. So that was that. So Russia was fairly backward. The Russian army was fairly backward. It's very like, in a way, the Russian invasion of Ukraine. They thought they were better. They underestimated the opponents. Like the British and French, they underestimated the Turks and the defense they could put up. Like Ukraine now, they overestimated their forces, and they weren't necessarily popular when they invaded. Again, like Vladimir Putin, Tsar Nicholas I thought God was on his side, and he thought he got a free hand in Turkey, but he hadn't. They misread the signals.
One other final question is, on your map, the colorful map that you showed, I think that shows the routes. To the east of Crimea is a yellow country, CIRG. What is that?
I think it's CIRC. I think it's probably Circassia.
Circassian.
Yeah, Circassian. I think. I'm not certain, but I think I know what you mean.
Okay. Yeah, CIRC.
Do you need to see the map, Adrian? Do you want me to put it up?
Yeah, I can put it up if you want.
Yeah.
You want me to share?
I got it here for you.
All right.
Yes, it's this yellow.
Yeah, it's the Circassians. Yeah, it's just the. I think some of the Cossacks are down there as well, aren't they? If I remember correctly, Don Cossacks. But that's the Circassians.
Colorful map. It's a great map.
Yeah, well, I don't know whether I've got copyright for it, so I might not say too much.
Okay, that part gets nixed from the video.
Yeah, oh, sorry, yeah, it's recorded, isn't it? Sorry about that.
That's okay. I think educational use is okay. We have a guy coming to speak on copyrights.
All right. I think it is educational use and it's non-profit making. So
Yeah, well, I figured it would be useful because there's always a lot of questions about that, so.
oh, there is.
Mm.
Yeah. I'm in learning design myself, and it's a bit of a nightmare. I'm using illustrations and such like. I mean, you must find it with catalogs and some such like.
Okay, are we all talked out? I mean, I know it's late. Thank you very much for staying up so late. That was,
Oh, Hugh, you got a question?
No, just saying goodbye.
Oh,
Well, I
okay.
hope you've enjoyed. Anybody who wants to contact me is more than welcome to. I'll do my best to help.
oh, that's great. And if I have wrote down a lot of follow-ups, if I happen to miss, just please send a note and we'll get to your message to Adrian.
Okay.
Okay, well, let's say
Right.
goodnight. And
Anybody who wants to contact me is more than welcome to. I'll do my best to help.
Thank you, Adrian.
Right. Thank you. Bye-bye.